Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for December 1st through the 7th, 2024. So let's get right to it. Starting with the Northeast region, I briefly wanted to make everyone aware of a series of events that has been ongoing in New Jersey over the past couple of weeks. And that is related to the drone sightings that have been reported throughout the state, really, over the past couple of weeks. Not a whole lot of detail to go on. I'm still doing a lot of research myself, but quite a few people on social media have been reporting various kinds of unidentified aircraft, mostly quadcopter styles of drones, some very large, some not so, some like standard consumer grade. And people have been observing them flying kind of in random places. Now, I don't have a whole lot of information on this. I'm still doing a lot of research myself, but unfortunately we have reached peak social media saturation on this over the past week or so for a few different reasons. And so it's made research quite difficult, mostly because a lot of people have been unaware or uncaring that commercial aircraft, regular commercial aircraft, fly at night with their lights on. So I have seen quite a few, unidentified drone sighting videos, which are quite literally just videos of commercial aircraft landing at an airport in New Jersey at night. You know how this goes. Grainy footage from 50 miles away of some sort of light in the sky. Turns out to be an aircraft that was just, a regular commercial aircraft. On the other hand, some images, some videos have been circulating that are genuine, but again, a lot of that's hard to verify because, as we all know how the whole UFO sighting game goes, you can't really get a whole lot of fidelity on a lot of this. But I did want to mention it because I think there may be a different kind of situation going on there. For instance, a lot of the drone sightings have been carried out in the vicinity of critical infrastructure and military development, factories, defense contractors, big defense contractors that make munitions and tech for the military. So discounting the UFO idea for a moment, I think that more realistically, it's probably one of two things. One, the actual U.S. military training, or some kind of defense contractor practicing or testing or something like that. So a legitimate like military police kind of use. However, hard to say because again, authorities don't really talk to each other a lot of times. So you could have a report that says, or listen to a police scanner where someone calls 911 about a drone, the police respond, the police put their own helicopter up to kind of find out where it's going, and it turns out to be military. And you never hear from it again because the police verified that it was okay, right? So it could be that. Another theory, which I think is probably more likely, is that this could be a slow increase in the trend of malign actors trying to conduct penetration operations with drones, basically reconnaissance operations or probing reconnaissance kind of thing. We've seen this quite a bit from overseas. A lot of military bases have had drones fly over or fly near them. We've also seen this down in Virginia a lot with a few bases down there. So it's not out of the realm of possibility for this to be not exactly a completely innocent thing, but also something that's not completely nefarious, like a sort of targeting effort. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's definitely something to be aware of if you're in the area or if you're located near a military base or something like that, or some kind of critical site for research and development. This is definitely something to be mindful of. Again, we've reached kind of media saturation on this in New Jersey to where I can't really find out what's real at the moment. So we're just going to have to let that one go for a bit and just kind of be aware of it. Moving over to New York, again, something that social media has run rampant with over the past week is the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO on the street in New York City outside his hotel. Once again, the debate on social media has largely clouded the overall issue here. People have focused on the firearm. People have focused on the professionalism of the shooter or the lack thereof it. People have focused on the photographs that people have, the authorities have put out of the assailant. I think a lot of this kind of gets down into the weeds and kind of ignores the larger picture, which is that we're now entering an era where professionally or unprofessionally, a professional hit job or not, someone, walked up to a CEO and killed him in cold blood without a second thought about it and walked away. The rawness of that is something that has definitely gotten the attention of quite a few other companies. because on the same day that this occurred, or shortly thereafter, Blue Cross, or a subsidiary of Blue Cross, or some kind of conglomerate affiliated with Blue Cross, announced that, well, the day prior, they had announced that they would not be covering the costs of anesthesia for the entire length of some surgeries. So it's not that the insurance company was saying turn off the gas, mid-surgery. It's that they were saying that they're not going to pay for the full length of it, which is, again, most people, I think, would agree it's a pretty rotten practice. But in any case, this highly inflammatory idea was immediately retracted once the UHC CEO was targeted. And beyond that, I'm looking kind of a little bit further into the strategic nature of this, and stepping into rumor land for a little bit, for a moment. This is unconfirmed, but I am seeing multiple reports. I don't know how accurate they are, don't know the source veracity or anything, but I'm seeing a lot of people talking about their companies, if they work at, say, a large insurance company or a large healthcare company. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about their companies doing training, like out of the blue, about morality and how trying to convince their employees that they are a good company and their CEOs are not evil. So, rightly or wrongly, it doesn't justify it, but it does kind of explain what's going on out there in the world with regards to, like, say, insurance companies or healthcare companies. So again, this kind of signals to me that a lot of other CEOs are concerned about this sort of vigilantism sort of thing. Again, I don't know how accurate any of this is. If it is accurate, I think that's very interesting. But again, people kind of get brought into the morality of all of this. But I personally am taking a more holistic, kind of higher level approach of recognizing that this is where we're at in the United States now. So again, I'll kind of leave that one for now. Moving down to the southeast, another incident which is rather concerning. I have not talked about it a lot since it started developing a few weeks ago, but now I wanted to kind of talk about it, even though we don't have a whole lot to go on. So please forgive me if this is largely speculative at the moment. A few days ago, or rather a few weeks ago, but more clarified a few days ago, the FBI, CISA, a few other federal agencies that are in charge of or involved in cybersecurity for the United States have very tentatively released a lot of information regarding a very large-scale allegedly Chinese cyber attack, which targeted a lot of intelligence collection platforms. Just to simplify things right out of the gate, I think personally what happened is China hacked and breached a lot of the tools, the intelligence collection tools and the backdoor access tools that federal agencies have to secure warrants and wiretaps. Now, the reason that I have been very hesitant to talk about this is because this vulnerability has been known for a very long period of time, so please do not think that this is a new concern. This goes back, I think the first discussions of this were back in the 80s, where a lot of tech companies, especially around the Cisco router scandal, where the world found out that the United States government had mandated certain companies to put hardware backdoors and software backdoors into a lot of their hardware before it was shipped to a consumer so that the NSA could spy on it easier. So this is maybe a little bit shocking for a lot of Americans to find out, but a lot of the things that we found out, again, from the Edward Snowden leaks confirm that this is a widespread practice. So you're going to fall into one of two camps upon hearing this news. One, you're going to be not surprised at all, and this doesn't affect you. That's the kind of camp that I'm in. Or two, you're going to be absolutely, dumbfounded that your government would do this. Well, you've got some homework because this has been going on for a very long period of time. Unfortunately, it seems like now China and, again, my own speculation, probably Russia as well, has essentially gotten the keys to the castle. They allegedly, or what this seems like the FBI is trying to tell us, because they're not being very clear on this, what it seems like they're trying to tell us is all of those little hardware backdoors, all those little ways of spying on the American people, the way of expediting wiretaps, the way of expediting cellular communication warrants, right? Whenever the police or the feds want to push forward a warrant, to get a warrant to spy on your text messages, there's a streamlined way of doing that, and China just got the keys to it, or took the keys to it rather. So that's where we sort of stand. You can possibly see why this is a very, very big issue. Now, again, I am not a software engineer. I am not in the world of, IT, information technology. I'm not in that world. But I can tell you that from my very limited interactions with the world of IT, there are sometimes you come upon an issue. Sometimes a software developer or software engineer comes upon an issue that is so ridiculously vulnerable, like it's a huge vulnerability. It is so gargantuanly massive that no one really knows what to do with it. We have seen this quite a lot over the years, and in some cases there have been issues where the potential impact is so gargantuanly large, it's easier to just ignore it and fire the guy who discovered the vulnerability. Again, a tale as old as time. But in this case, it seems to be that it doesn't really matter because the story is now out. And this is why the FBI is being quite tentative about it. They're being kind of quiet. CISA has had they've released a lot of information, but they're also not really wanting to admit how big of a deal this is. Telling the American people that, guess what, every single text message sent by every single cell phone in the United States of America is now in the hands of China. That's a bold statement, and that's really hard to kind of wrap your mind around. You're talking about things like two-factor authentication codes that are, everyone uses two-factor authentication now, and a lot of times you have to get a text message on your phone, right? Well, now that's in China's hands. So you can see how this is one of those issues to where it's so gargantuanly large, no one really knows what to do about it. Various unnamed and named FBI officials have stated just don't send text messages. That's their advice. Don't send SMS text messages. Use an encrypted app like Signal or WhatsApp. Again, there's probably a little bit of a self-serving interest there with some of these apps, but the vulnerabilities with the SMS system and cellular communications in general these vulnerabilities have been known for a very long period of time, and now it would seem the chickens have come home to roost, and now we have a vulnerability that's been exploited. But again, this is all largely speculative. It's one of those things where nobody really wants to commit to an assessment of how bad it is because it's quite bad. So I guess we'll just have to figure this out. Also, another detail is no one really knows when this breach happened. They don't know how long China's had access to this. They don't know if China's the only one who has access to this. They just don't know. And if they do know, they probably aren't telling anybody. So my guess is that in a couple of months, the whole world will have forgotten about this, but the vulnerability will still probably be there. Maybe they could patch some things. I don't know. But it seems like it's not just one breach. It's not just one server that got compromised. It's not just one company. It's the entire ecosystem of federal intelligence collection on Americans. So everything Snowden leaked is what it seems like they breached. So just more homework for later, I guess. Is that an accurate way of, portraying the situation? I don't know. But the FBI is not really giving us much to go on here. CISA is not giving us much to go on. So we have to kind of assume worst case scenario and then walk it back to a more reasonable perspective once we know more information. So we'll have to leave that one there for now and come back to it once we know more. Now, let's jump out of the United States and over to Syria, where some very serious escalations have been undertaken. So, as many of you know from the Wire reports this week, the situation in Syria has gone from bad to worse in terms of the Assad regime's control over the situation. The Syrian rebels, who I'm going to just call HTS for simplicity's sake, because mostly they're conglomerated under the group of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which is, an offshoot of the al-Nusra Front, which is an offshoot of al-Qaeda. The United States classifies HTS as a foreign terrorist organization, so they are an FTO, which is why the United States doesn't want to claim that they're supporting the HTS guys in Syria. A lot of them probably are the same guys that have been fighting under the banner of being a rebel in Syria over the past 10, 15 years. However, a lot of them are just ISIS rebranded, Al-Qaeda rebranded, to seem a little bit more palatable to the West. Again, that is very much debatable depending on who you want to believe, but from my own experience working the Operation Inherent Resolve issue a few years ago, that's kind of what I think. So that's just my opinion, is these guys are probably a lot of the ISIS holdovers that once we eradicated ISIS, we didn't really kill everybody. The ISIS sort of just rebranded itself, changed their name a few times, hooked back up with Al-Qaeda a little bit here and there, and kind of form as a more just coherent counter-Assad movement. So, like I mentioned, things have gotten very, very serious over the past week or so in Syria. And just to highlight how serious this has gotten, let's take a look at a map of who controlled what in Syria from 2019. So this is an Al Jazeera map, a situational emplacement, or SITTEMP, from 2019. This is the most accurate picture of the factions and factional allegiances that I could find from 2019-2020 era. So this is basically what the situation has been since 2019, 2020. There have been a little bit of fighting here and there. In the Idlib region mostly, where HTS kind of, their little pocket there in Idlib, they have had a lot of fighting back and forth, but for the most part, since 2020, this is what the map has looked like. It hasn't changed very much. So this is how the situation has been for a long time, for several years now, mostly. But in the past 6 days, this map has changed to this. This is the map as of this morning from Live UA Map. So this is an auto-updating map of the front lines in Syria as sort of compiled by social media. So they have a couple of web crawlers that pull in a lot of data and georeference things automatically. So Live UA Map is not a perfect resource. There are errors on it occasionally, but this is the best map that I can find for now, because I just don't have the time to start plotting these things. The advance is happening too quickly. So this is how things have gone. And as you can imagine, things have gone quite poorly for the Assad regime. So right now, as of this morning, December 7th, a second front has emerged in the south in classic Syrian fashion. A second front has emerged and is driving north to Damascus. So we now have, in addition to the northern front, which drove both east and south from the Idlib region, they punched over to Aleppo, took Aleppo, while simultaneously driving south down to Hama and Homs now. And they're continuing to drive south, as far as I know, as far as I can tell on social media this morning. Well, as you could probably imagine, in Syria, one of the things that happens is once the balance of power reaches a tipping point in certain regions, you have mass defections from one group to another. So miraculously, boom, you now have a second or third front, depending on how you wanted to label it. So there is another southern front that is now on the outskirts of Damascus. Do you see how quickly this has happened just in the past couple of days? So let's examine both of these fronts a little bit more closely. As we can see here, this is the northern front that I'm going to call it. This is the situation as of, again, this morning, where the HTS rebels are essentially on the outskirts of Homs. They haven't crossed Ring Road yet, as far as I know. But they may probably have already crossed it. They may have already taken Homs by the time this video comes out. So again, Homs is another major city that has a long history in the Syrian War, and it was fought over for many years. So yeah, that's the situation as of this morning. And let's take a look at the southern front here, Damascus. As you can see, we've seen a lot of probing attacks just pop up out of nowhere with Syrian rebel forces, the HTS guys, punching from south to north into Damascus. Now, Damascus is a very large city, right? One might consider it to be the cradle of civilization, right? We're in kind of the heartland of the Levant here, so you can't just roll into Damascus and just take it unless no fighting occurs. And that has been one of the things that a lot of people have been looking out for that have been kind of hard to verify. So let's talk about what Assad's been up to since this whole kind of thing kicked off. So Assad is a big dude, a big power player in the region. He has endured quite a lot, so he's a very resilient leader. That's the one thing you can say about him. If you hate him, fine, but you got to say he's resilient, because he held his country together for the most part. He held his regime together, I should say, through 15 years of very heavy fighting where we've got multiple international proxies kind of using Syria as a playground for whatever they want to do. So I personally find it very hard to believe that Assad can withstand this 15 years of war, a very hot war, only to lose his entire country in 4 days. It doesn't make any sense to me. But again, this is Syria, so if there were ever a place for that to happen, it would be Syria. Who knows, though? We will have to certainly see. Assad, for the most part, has not been seen or heard from since this whole sort of thing started. So that is kind of concerning, and it does point to maybe those rumors of him getting on a plane in the middle of the night and flying to Moscow to seek refuge there. Maybe that did happen. I don't know. I can't verify it, and the burden of proof is on Assad. Like, where are you, bro? You can't figure out where he's at. So he hasn't had, as far as I can tell, there have been no public addresses, no public sightings. The Syrian army has basically just collapsed in most areas and withdrawn all the way back to Damascus. Again, that's not out of the realm of, normalcy for Syria. That's kind of the way this has gone sometimes over the war. It's been a very dynamic conflict. So, yeah, Syria is such a hard and complex conflict to kind of say. Like, if this had happened in Iraq, I would say, yeah, this regime has collapsed. It's fallen. It's falling as we speak. But in Syria, they've come back from quite a lot. So it's hard to say. Russia, their activities have been a little bit more concerning. They have basically just withdrawn. They have pulled all the way back to Tartus, their forces in the north, and they've a few other advisors and military command structures have pulled back to Damascus. But most of them, from what I've been able to see, in terms of what I've been able to see on social media, in terms of photos and things like that, they've pulled all the way back to Tartus. So again, that's not really a good sign in terms of the Assad regime's longevity in the region. Now, once again, it will take time to figure this out, but just me shooting from the hip here, Syria might not have that time. Like I wrote in The Wire yesterday, many a regime has fallen while they're waiting to make a move, or while they underestimate the rebel forces, and then sooner or later they're in the palace. They're on the palace steps. So this has happened throughout the Middle East since the dawn of civilization, and it may be happening right now. On the other hand, we could see a strong advance, a strong counterattack from Russia. Who knows? So the Assad regime, the Syrian regime, and Russia are largely treating this diplomatically as just a minor revolt kind of thing. Like it's a minor, police issue kind of thing. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It seems an awful lot like it's a straight-up rebellion. So I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. And like I said, the Assad regime, they don't have the benefit of waiting and seeing. They've got to do something sooner or later, or their whole country is going to collapse. And just to cut right to the chase as to where Americans might want to pay attention to this is when a power vacuum appears in Syria, very, very, very bad things tend to happen all around the world. As we can see, Syria is a very complex conflict. You've got Russia, Turkey, China, Israel, the United States, very big power players in the region, all having their claws in Syria. And, things get really, really dicey. So Turkey can make things challenging for NATO because Turkey's a NATO member, right? We can have other conflicts break out throughout the whole Palestine issue. That can happen. We've got tensions with Russia. Russia is not in the mood to play right now. They are absolutely not bluffing on much of what they say, which is somewhat perplexing because Russia is very well known to bluff. But I don't think they're bluffing on a lot of what they're saying nowadays. So they may not be playing with Syria, and of course the United States. The U.S. has got their grubby fingers in every conflict around the world. So why would it be any different here? In any case, it's going to be very, very important to see what happens in Syria. I know most people don't care about it, but I'll keep an eye on it. And we'll see how this plays out because it's going to affect things like probably everything from banking to energy, and resource mining and all kinds of stuff. Syria is a very, very big and very important country to just be overthrown like that in the dead of night kind of thing. This is not like Angola or anything. This is like a serious country. This is Syria here. So, you know, we can see why the coalition kind of got started in Syria, and I guess we'll have to see how it works out, especially when it comes to the Iranian connection. How the Iranians treat this sort of thing will be very, very interesting to see. So let's jump around the world again and talk about what is happening in South Korea. In typical fashion, South Korean politics remains very entertaining and also very, very serious at the same time. So I know that a lot of people, especially from an American perspective, might not know that the South Korean political scene is largely just an exercise in sheer insanity. South Korea's politics has been crazy, like utterly unbelievable sometimes, really since the 80s, going back to the kind of military dictatorship sort of days. When it comes to South Korean politics, a lot of this seems to be very, very, very serious, and it is. However, I think, and the reason that I talk about it is I think that a lot of people are looking at the craziness of South Korea, and they look at it and say, oh, well, South Korea's politics are crazy anyway, so this doesn't really affect things. I disagree with that. I think the events over the past week have been very, very serious. So, just to very briefly recap, what has happened? Well, at the wave-top level, here's what's happened. The largely hardline conservative president of South Korea declared a military coup, essentially. He declared martial law, and he activated troops to essentially seize his political opponents in the National Assembly building, here as we can see in the city of Seoul, the capital region. Now, why did he do this? Well, his own arguments are that the communists have essentially taken over his country's political system, and he wanted to stress how important it is for the communists to not maintain any sort of power or control in South Korea. Now, again, this may seem to be a little strange to an American audience, but you have to remember Korea's history. South Korea's entire existence is revolving around their relationship with North Korea. So when you call someone a communist in the United States, it bounces off of them, you know, with very little effect. It doesn't really matter in the United States. In South Korea, when you call someone a communist, you had better well mean it, because it carries a very strong connotation of essentially being a traitor, an enemy, something very, very serious, right? Especially considering that South Korea's essentially one and only enemy is, you know, North Korea, China, if you want to also say the same about them as well. So the president says the commies are here, launches essentially a military coup to prevent an impeachment vote of himself, and that's how this has kind of worked out. So he declares martial law. In South Korea, much like many other places around the world, martial law means no politics. All politics are banned. We are now living in a military command structure kind of thing. And of course, they sent troops to the National Assembly building to shut down the political process in his country. Now, from that, the political game has been very, very, very tenuous, I should say. A few moments after the declaration of martial law was issued, all of the politicians, all of the members of parliament in South Korea rushed to the National Assembly building, scaling fences. You've got, 60, 70-year-old politicians jumping hedges and whatnot to get over the barricades and barriers to launch essentially a vote in the electoral house, right, to overturn that declaration of martial law, which they did. So, the president declares martial law, locks down the political system, sends in the troops, and the politicians were able, a very tense situation, they were able to hold the vote immediately and overturn this martial law thing and let it simmer down for a few hours. But the saga did not end there. So immediately after that, the talk began to more seriously consider the president's impeachment. And this is where we get into, well, it's a little bit more complicated than just a man who went crazy and just declared martial law and is a dictator and all that. Because it turns out that the president's claims of the communists are here are not entirely inaccurate. A lot of his political opposition in Parliament is extremely left wing and very sympathetic towards North Korea. So you can see how it's not as simple as one might imagine. Regardless of this, I think the general sentiment throughout all South Korean politicians is, yeah, he had a point. The communists are kind of here. He has a point, but he should not have gone as far as declaring martial law. He should not have done that. That's kind of the general gist throughout most people involved in the situation in some form or fashion. Now, his own party has kind of flip-flopped on whether or not they're supporting him in his impeachment efforts. So, as of the time I'm recording this, the vote to impeach him should be kind of underway, so I'm probably missing some very juicy developments on the ground at the moment. However, generally speaking, his party flip-flopped back and forth on whether or not they're going to support him. So they said, to begin with, right after the martial law, hey man, you should not have done that. That's not a good thing. You should not have declared martial law. Okay, fine, you don't like your political opposition. We don't like them either, but you shouldn't have gone that far, because this country has very, very strong memories. The last time martial law was declared, people got killed. So this is not good, so you should not have done that. Well, a few hours later, they sort of changed their mind and say, you know what, all right, he said he's sorry kind of thing. He didn't really apologize. I don't think he apologized. But anyway, the situation has simmered down. We reversed the martial law thing. You made your point. Go sit back down. So we're going to prevent your opposition from impeaching you. A few hours elapsed, and they found out, oh, wait a minute, you totally issued the order to stand down, right? You totally we're just crossing our T's and dotting our I's here. You absolutely canceled the martial law order, right? And the president goes, yeah, I'm going to cancel it the day after the impeachment vote. So his own party, the People Power Party, essentially said, wait a minute, you're going to do this again, aren't you? You're going to declare martial law again if the parliament decides to impeach you. And so they said, no, we're not going to support you now. Well, they had like a 10.5-hour deliberation on this, and basically came to the conclusion, as of this brief, it's probably going to change by the time I get this published, but as of this brief, his political party has stated they will not support an impeachment of him, the president. So that's where things stand right now. It will definitely change by the time this comes out, so please don't be surprised if this is inaccurate or stale by the time this video comes out. But anyway, that's where we kind of stand now. His opposition has taken the opportunity to kind of cover up their actual communist dealings, and are kind of solidifying this under the banner of trying to get him out. So it's become a kind of a whole thing. More tactically, the situation remains kind of tense. So as you can see here from the graphic, there are many different helicopter landing zones. So as we recall, troops were activated to come in and shut down Parliament. And they landed their helicopters at a hasty improvised HLZ, the soccer field to the northwest of the building, the National Assembly building. And some reports say, I don't have any photos of it, but some reports say they also landed in the parking lot because it was in the middle of the night, so there weren't any cars there, so they landed in the parking lot to the north of the building. So staffers, civilians, just people in general have strung debris and obstacles all over these potential places where a helicopter can land. Allegedly, that's what they've done, so they can kind of buy themselves a little bit more time. Will that work? I don't know. There's only a few places you can land a helicopter in the National Capital Region there, but it's on the coast. So they could do an amphibious operation if they wanted to, and they can also fast rope into the roof of the building, which is what I suspect they were originally going to do. But anyway, you see how this is kind of a tenuous situation. There's checkpoints, military blockades, and barricades at pretty much every intersection that I can see around this complex here in the government quarter of Seoul. So, it's one of those situations where it can get very, very kinetic. Several members of parliament are living, essentially. They're living in the National Assembly chamber. At least one of them is sleeping there. And many others are essentially living in their offices and having food delivered. So you can see how this is kind of a diplomatic standoff now, where everyone's kind of just waiting to see, is the president going to do it again, or are we going to get some more opposition going here, or what's going on? In any case, I know a lot of Americans probably won't care about what's going on in South Korea, but South Korea, again, a very big power player. So this definitely affects our relationship with China and with North Korea in a larger, grander sense, I guess. So we'll follow this. We'll see how things are developing there. Again, a lot of South Korean society is revolved around an American presence as well. So I'm personally interested in finding out what did the United States do? What does the United States think about this? Other than their just classic BS, we stand with democracy kind of statements, what is the U.S. doing? Because as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the military commands that took part in this, as far as I know, are very heavily embedded with Americans. So did Americans take part in this? This sort of auto coup, a coup in which a leader wants to keep power, not seize it, right? He wants to keep it for himself. Did the United States have any role in this? Or did the United States support the opposition? I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating here. Some questions that we should probably be asking. What is the United States going to do in all of this? So, again, it's one of those situations. It's kind of tough to describe because it's so complicated. It would take many, many, many hours to describe the complexity of South Korean politics. But for now, hopefully this will work as kind of a general notice of how things are going to go down. Hopefully the situation calms down and they can re-enter the political arena, but I've never seen this sort of thing happen. I mean, even for South Korea, it's kind of surprising. So this is a very, very interesting thing where a political leader can think they survive a coup, and they actually survive a coup attempt. Like, just kidding, guys, I don't know. We'll see. They may end up impeaching him. I think it's going to be hard to survive it. But if, like I said in The Wire, if this crazy situation can continue and actually work out in President Yoon's favor, if it could happen anywhere on Earth, it would be in South Korea. So I guess we'll see that works out as the next week comes. So that's all I have for news. Let's talk about the intercepted GhostNet reports. Got a couple of messages this week, actually. A lot of people are taking advantage of the messaging feature in JS8 Call, which is fantastic. This is very, very good. I've considered putting that into the doctrine a little bit more, but I kind of want to play around with it a little bit more because it ends up sometimes being a little bit contentious. Anyway, in JS8 Call, you can send messages to the group, and anyone who is listening to the JS8 Call GhostNet tag, you can get a message in your inbox. You don't even have to transmit for this. You can actually just set up a receive-only setup, and as long as you're following the GhostNet tag, you will get messages. And one of the many messages I got this week pertained to Pearl Harbor Day remembrance activities out there in Hawaii. So as the message here states, there are a lot of frequencies, a lot of the ships that are taking part in remembrance ceremonies and things like that are actually engaging in ham radio stuff. So that's kind of a cool thing to tie that into the remembrance and memorial ceremonies. They're doing a lot of that sort of thing. So there's the frequencies. I don't know the timing on that. I don't normally participate myself because I can't quite reach these transmitter sites. But again, for those of you who are kind of interested in that sort of thing, there you go. And it highlights how cool it is to send messages on JS8 Call. Again, a lot of people are talking about local news items, more national news items that I didn't cover, so that's fantastic. So this is really turning out to be a very good information exchange system. Again, it's not perfect. I'll say that, till I'm blue in the face. It is not perfect. We're not really using it in its intended role. We're kind of, having to kind of work with what we've got, right? So this works out better than expected. I'll say it that way. So thank you all for those of you who are participating in the GhostNet stuff. You guys are keeping it going. You guys are keeping it alive, and I really do appreciate that. So that's fantastic. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Here are the sources. Again, kind of a dynamic week. A lot of stuff going on. I guess we'll have to kind of see how this next week develops. Hopefully the situation in Syria and in South Korea can reach a level of peace. But again, it's always interesting how things kind of kick off around the world whenever there's an American change of power. So, the United States kind of gets a little bit unsettled and the world kind of devolves into a lot of interesting times, right? So Again, that's pretty much all I have for today. Thank you guys all for watching. Thank you all for your support, and I will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.